Hi, my name is Dan, and I am romantically challenged.
Hi, Dan. Dan, I want you to share your feelings, even though it goes against everything you stand for as a man.
I tried the trick that Jerry taught us last week.
A trick is what a two-bit magician does at a county fair. Jerry was given a technique, and a technique...
Hey, Dr. Phil, let him finish.
So anyway, I decided I'd use Jerry's technique last week when my wife came to me all exasperated and pulling her hair out and whatnot about her job. And I used Jerry's words exactly. I said, now, honey, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to listen or fix it? And what'd she say?
Listen. Fix it.
And so anyway, I tried to listen. I really did. But in the middle of listening, I came up with a 7-point plan to fix it. I'm so ashamed.
It's okay, Dan. Hey, you're multitasking, all right? And that is very hard for your untrained one-track man brain to do. Feel proud of that, all right? Who's next?
Hey, I'll go. Hey guys, I'm Jerry, and I'm romantically challenged.
Hey, Jerry.
This weekend, I saw some extra charges on Cindy's bank card. So, yeah. But I, instead of yelling and screaming like I normally would, I acted in a more Christ-like manner. So I simply turned over her nightstand and her scrapbooking table and said, "Get out of here, money changer." I was like, "Get out."
I think when it says that we should love our wives like Christ loved the church, that means that we're supposed to serve and sacrifice for them.
Hey, I was cleansing the temple. I
think the question is, how many of you have ever done anything for your wife without desiring anything in return?
Are you even married?
Jesus wasn't married. Now look, the point I'm trying to... No, I'm not, and that stings a little bit. I have read parts of a lot of relationship books, and if anyone thinks they can lead this group better than I can, put your hand down, Jerry. Who wants to go next? Bathroom break isn't it yet.
Sorry, I gotta go. Sorry, guys.
Oh, Mr. Big Guy doesn't want to share, does he?
Not tonight.
Probably doesn't care about his wife.
Okay, I'll share. This is a picture of my wife and kids. I've been married for 20 years. We married young, and I don't regret it. I remember when we got engaged, her father looked at me and he said, "Just love her the way Christ loved the church." I smiled and said I would, having no idea what that meant. And I still don't know if I understand it. But you know what I want? I want to be a man who wakes up every morning and asks the question, how can I bless my wife? Men, isn't that what you want? I mean, isn't your wife worth it?
Hey, wait. Oh, Captain, my captain.
Sit down, Jerry.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
Okay, enough. Sit down. What is going on? Sit down. Please, sit down. I need a wife.
Anybody here need a wife? Just raise your hand. We're going to help you with that. We got this special meeting after the gatherings today, and so, well, good morning, everybody. How you doing so far? So buckle your seatbelts. This is Man Week 2, when we're talking about the husband's responsibilities for building health into relationship, and especially his relationship with his wife. You may want to reach for the notes that you received when you came in. We also have a digital option online that you can access on YouVersion. And we are going to begin. Do you remember your homework assignments? We're going to begin with the last 3 verses of Ephesians chapter 5 this morning. And then we're going to do just one verse in 1 Peter chapter 3, just verse number 7, okay? Now, let me kind of build context, if I may. Guys, men, husbands, we need to be willing to say that next to our relationship with God, nothing should be more important to us than our relationship with our wife. And if you're not willing to do that, I say to you with kindness, then stay single. Because when we become married men, some good things gotta go. Why? So that we can prioritize the best thing in our life, which is our relationship with God and our relationship with our wives. There are some real upside to being single. And here's the funny thing, not everybody, most single people would love to be married, and many married people would love to be single. How come nobody is ever happy where they are? Just saying. When we're single, we can do what we want, when we want, how we want. We don't have to get anybody's permission. We have to consult with no one. Paul talked about that. He said to live a life of singleness, you're unencumbered. You're free to make those kinds of decisions. But when we become, as Christ followers and husbands, men that have a wife, then she needs to move way up the food chain in our priority scale in life. Now, I got to looking at some of the recent marriage research by some of the best marriage and relationship institutes in the United States, and there is an interesting trend emerging that women in marriages today are having more affairs than ever before. In other words, why are more women wandering? And here's what all the research seemed to be saying simultaneously: because their husbands aren't paying attention. Now, that doesn't justify the affair. I'm not saying that. But that's the reason why they get the wanderlust, as it were, because what women are looking for, in some sense, is somebody that will become a soulmate to them, somebody that will pay attention to them. And guys, it's not because they're selfish and self-absorbed. I mean, it can be that. The vast majority of times, it's not that. That is the need that she has as a woman, as your wife. You say, well, John, I work hard. And you ought to work hard, and you should do so with diligence and integrity. But guys, when she married you and I, she did not marry our paycheck. She married us. And that's why when we're married, we were first married, do you remember? Materially, we had nothing. But because we had a deep foundation of love at that point, do you know what we had? Everything. Nothing materially, but in terms of love and the stuff that matters most, we had everything. And then the decades roll on, and pretty soon we have everything materially, and many times we have nothing because love is gone. Don't let that happen in your marriage relationship. You say, John, how can I avoid that? Constantly tending your relationship, cultivating a regular awareness, paying attention to the drift and the movement and the trends and inclinations of your relationship. What happened is we go AWOL and things drift and deteriorate. In this research that I consulted, it was interesting that for people 50 years and older, in the vast majority of divorces in America, and this is not just the faith community, this is all Americans. So for Americans that are in their 50s and older, which implies generally that they've been married for maybe several decades, divorce was not an aha moment. What it usually was many, many years of dysfunctional patterns that for one reason or other, the couples could not break those dysfunctional patterns. And so over time, the patterns broke the couple. Does that make sense? And so what ensued was a quiet divorce. And so what we've been talking about really now, this is our fourth weekend, we're talking about the reality that vows do not keep themselves. Everybody that is in a long-term healthy relationship has paid an incredible price to make it so. It's not just that they're intrinsically nicer people or that God likes them better and has given them more favor. That's not how it works. They've simply, both husband and wife, paid a very high price over many years to make it so. I wish I could tell you something that was 3 simple, handy-dandy steps to a successful marriage every time. It doesn't work that way because there's 2 things involved in marriage that make 3 steps to handy-dandy impossible. It's called 2 very flawed people. And when we come to the point that what we've really done in our marriage relationship is we've made a lifelong commitment to a flawed person, both partners. And if we can't get over the foibles, the idiosyncrasies that cause us to want to pull our hair out and make friends with those, peculiarities that our spouse uniquely has in his or her life, we will probably bail. And do you know what we do when we bail? We go looking for greener pastures. And we may get a new green pasture, so to speak, at least on the front end, that doesn't have the same problems as the last pasture we just left. No, the new pasture has a whole new set of their own unique problems. And you just spent 25 years trying to figure out the last pasture, and you just about had it done, then you bailed. Now you got a whole new pasture. You got 25 more years of going to school ahead of you. You know what's going to happen? You're going to get very old. And so grass is greener what? Where we water it. And so when we look at this, we are reminded that the courageous kind of loving relationship that matters is understanding that love is a long process. It's a long process, and we don't throw in the towel. And so, guys, what are we talking about here? A new level of paying attention. There's a guy named Bill Hybels, and I think Bill is spot on when he says these words. He goes, guys, we need to inspire our wife regularly. Most men are married to women who've been victimized by chauvinistic undertow. And maybe many of the men in the house would say, oh, no, that's not so. This is 21st century in America. You say that because you're a dude. And you're not paying attention and not aware. It is true. Chauvinistic undertow. Our wives grew up in cultures that minimized their value, underestimated their abilities, and depreciated their potential, often simply because they're a female. We husbands who know anything about the Bible realize that women are full image bearers of God. And one way to show our wives how much we treasure them is to inspire them to reach their potential, saying things to them like, sweetheart, what is it that you would love to do in your life? What skill would you like to hone? How can I cheer you on? When you treasure someone, you say, I love you so much, I want you to grow. I want you to soar. I want you to be fulfilled. I want you to be in a dynamic phase of your life. I want you to be satisfied, sweetheart. Now, I'm not a betting man, but if I were a betting man, this kind of dude in a marriage relationship that holds in his heart these kinds of attitudes and values, I like his odds long term to have a long term, healthy, loving, mutually satisfied marriage relationship. By the way, that usually sizzles most of the time. Okay, let's look to the book. Join me in the New Testament. We're in Ephesians chapter 5, and we are only going to look with focus at 3 verses, verse 31, 32, and 33. Join me there, would you please? Now, guys, I don't know if you are into scripture memory, but if you are, one that has got to be on your top 10 list is Ephesians 5:25. That was the foundational understanding for last weekend. Do you remember? Check it out with me, guys. Look at it. In fact, every man in the room, read it together with me now. Just verse 25 in a big, loud voice. Go. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's the centerpiece foundation. All right, let's go down to verse 31. The Bible says, this is Paul writing to the Ephesian church, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Now, I was not intending to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say this if I can be a father for a moment. Ladies, I want to say to you, do not become emotionally attached to a man that will not leave his mommy and daddy. I'm just saying. This is probably not very popular. I think it may well be a good thing for husbands and wives to move, as Shrek would say, far, far away for the first year, 2 or 3 of marriage, because it forces you to leave and to cleave. Now, I'm not talking about a man that doesn't care for his aging or elderly parents, or a man that's not concerned about his parents' welfare, but not a man that has a mommy in one ear and a wife in the other ear. I'm just telling you who's going to win. Who you think's going to win? Who bore that kid in pain? There's your answer. Okay, so notice what Paul says. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. So there's a leaving and a cleaving, or a uniting, and then notice the two will become one flesh. Now that is not just a sexual oneness, and we'll be talking about sex some weeks down the line. That is a coming together of all the composite of who we are uniquely as a male and as a female. I want you to fill this in, our first fill in for this weekend. Here we go. Truth does not change because we change. There is a powerful statement in 21st century American culture. Truth does not change because we change. Now, think with me logically and analytically. What's the tension here? What is truth? And then the answer is depending on who you ask. Okay? Now, let me just say this. The original eternal definition of marriage, we just read here in verse number 31. This is the description of marriage by the one that created marriage, the one that designed marriage, the loving, holy God of the Bible. When I say truth does not change because we change, I want you to know that the very definition, and we're all well aware of this, the very definition of what marriage actually is up for grabs in America today. I understand that, and I speak with no contentious or rancorous spirit with those who would hold a different opinion. I know that even what is a man and what is a woman is up for grabs in America today. I understand that. However, I say with a gentle spirit, and with love in my heart for all my fellow citizens and human beings, truth does not change because we change. This is what marriage is. We see it here in crystal clear simplicity in verse number 31. And by the way, you may or may not have noticed that Paul is quoting all the way back to the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. It is the exact words that God said when he first created marriage. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. God created marriage in the home even before he created the state or the church. For the creation which he has created, it was to be his centerpiece achievement. And so I say, let God be true. He is the designer, and his design is one man with one woman for a lifetime. I want to say a passing comment of grace for those of you that have had a marriage failure, a divorce, a separation, maybe even more than one. It doesn't doom you to living outside God's love or God's grace or God's best for your life. Yes, you may have had a marriage relationship fail. God still loves you. He has not now passed you by. He is not now done with you. Continue to make the courageous adjustments in your life to align your life with the liberating principles of his word. It invites his grace and his active presence to be regularly at work in his life. He still loves you very much. Look at verse 32 with me, would you? Paul continues, he says, now this is a profound mystery. What's a profound mystery? The whole marriage deal. He says, but I am talking about Christ and the church. Now, we have talked over these last 4 weekends that the overarching understanding or umbrella over all of Ephesians chapter 5 is that as believers, fill this in, our marriages are a parallel illustration of Christ's love for his church, his commitment to his church, and his union with his church. Commitment. Love, commitment, and union. Now, husbands, it's interesting that those three qualities of love, commitment, and union that Jesus has for us, the church, are the same exact parallel qualities, guys, that you and I as husbands ought to be cultivating in our marriage relationships. Love, commitment, and union toward the wife that God has blessed us with. Remember what we quoted in unison together from Proverbs 18 last week? He who finds a wife finds what? A good thing. I would even strike good and say the best thing. Now, our relationship with God can never be right if our relationship with our wife is wrong. So don't think, guys, that we can allow drift, negligence, callousness, or whatever to live in our heart for months, years, or even decades. And we can go and do our public Jesus thing, our weekend church deal, and it's all good, and at home everything is coming undone with two people dwelling under the same roof, and they can hardly stand the sight of each other. That is not the will of God. Remember, men marry hoping that she will not change. Women marry hoping that he will change, and they're both wrong. We need to go into our marriage relationship with our eyes wide open. Okay, let's check out verse number 33. Paul wraps it up with this epic aspect of the marriage relationship. However, Paul concludes, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Okay, time out. I want to give you we like to provide bibliographies and additional resources. I mean, we teach for 30 minutes on the weekend, but we want to all be growing and learning on a regular basis, right? I want to recommend this book by Dr. Gregg. It's called Love and Respect, and the subtitle is The Love That She Most Desires and the Respect That He Desperately Needs. I can assure you a marriage relationship will not thrive long term unless the woman has a clear sense that she is loved. It is her deepest desire. Unless a man has a clear sense that he is deeply respected, that is hardwired into the masculine DNA. I want to recommend this to you. I think it's a great read. Now, notice what is happening here in this passage. You wives may be saying, well, he's not becoming what I want him to, and I'm getting a little sick and tired of waiting. Remember what submission is: ducking, so God can hit your husband. You may be mucking it up. You may be creating an interruption there and aborting what God is trying to do. Why don't you just duck, get out of the way, and let the Father's heart deal straight with your husband's heart? I promise you, God can tune us up in ways that our wives never can. Fill this in. Love and respect are two vital core values in any marriage that succeeds over a lifetime. And then this, fill it in as well. It's not difficult for a wife to respect her husband if he is sacrificially loving her. Guys, is this not the truth? You don't have to be a spiritual rocket scientist to say, oh yeah, that's so. Any guy with just basic common sense can say, you know what? I've never looked at it that way. Maybe the problem of why she's so stubborn or so resistant or so difficult is I'm not doing my part. So I'm going to leave her part between her and God, and I'm going to do my part. I will sacrificially love her, treasure her, honor her, serve her. Now, here's a scary question, guys. Here's your homework assignment. I'm just going to tell you ahead of time. You are not going to want to do it, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow. Your grade, your final grade, has very much bearing on successfully completing this assignment. Here's the question. Guys, ask your wife this question. Sweetheart, what is it that I do that causes you to have disrespect for me or to lose respect for me? Now, I know that's a loaded question. I can assure you that every wife in the house is a humble, gentle, loving, encouraging woman, guys. Ladies, I'm trying to help you here. I'm on your side in the moment. When we ask those kinds of loaded questions, I think that's when we begin to do the hard work of truth happening in our marriage relationship. Now, ladies, you're quick enough to know that that means that you probably ask a parallel question. Honey, what is it that I do that makes it difficult for you to love me in a way that God wants you to love me and I want you to love me? What is it that I'm doing or not doing? Because there are sins of commission and sins of omission. Now, there's more we could say, but we're going to stop there with Ephesians 5. I want you to pivot quickly with me, and let's go to 1 Peter chapter 3. Would you join me there? We're in 1 Peter chapter 3, so no longer is Paul the writer, but Peter, who was the leader of the 12 disciples, he is now writing in this first of his 2 letters to the churches some of the additional best marriage advice in all of the Bible. Other than Ephesians 5, I think 1 Peter 3 is the best in the New Testament. Do you see it there? So, ladies, we looked at the first 6 verses, didn't we? And challenged and encouraged wives in those 6 verses. Now we're going to focus just on one verse for the guys, verse number 7. So look with me at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Let me read it to you, and you follow along. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner, as heirs with you or co-heirs of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. There are 5 things happening in this epic verse. And guys, this is also part of your homework assignment. I hope that you were able to flesh out what those 5 life applications for marriage are. Let's run through them quickly. Number 1, fill it in, considerate. Husbands are to be considerate of their wife. You say, John, what does considerate mean? Well, I think the nuance of the Greek in this context implies this. It means to know your wife. And that's not in a sexually intimate knowing. It's in knowing the totality of her, body, soul, and spirit. It is knowing her. It is studying her. It is living with her like a textbook. See, sometimes we've been there, guys, in that marriage relationship, even for decades. We've been there, but there ain't no there. We also haven't gone to school there. In other words, we're not paying attention. We're not. It means to feel her. It means to understand her. It means to listen to her. It means to dive into her inner core being. It means to be there when you're there. It means to pay attention. It means to demonstrate kindness. Now, how many of you guys are very in touch with the 5 love languages? Let me see your hands. Guys are in touch with the 5 love. A bunch of women's hands went up, and then the elbows are happening. Stop it. This is our time, girls. You're messing with us. Okay, guys, the 5 love languages. Now, some of you guys, and I don't fault you on this because I drift this way too. You know, we know every nuance of every penalty, every player, every statistic in the N, F, and L. But we don't know the 5 love languages. Ask yourself, what is my wife's love language? If you haven't understood yet what your wife's love language is, you have not studied her like a textbook yet. You've gone there, but there is no there because we're not paying attention. The 5 love languages are words of affirmation, gifts. 35 guys just said, oh yeah, that's her. She's a strictly cash gal. Okay, words of affirmation. Number 2, gifts. Number 3, acts of service. Number 4, quality time. Number 5, physical touch. Now, most of the guys in the house are hoping, I've never thought about this. I hope it's number 5, physical touch, because that's my number 1. Okay. What most of the time women want is physical touch that's not sexual. That's what that kind of physical touch is. Y'all are thinking the other kind, and as a dude, I'm thinking that way too. Let me say the 5 again. Words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. Do you know that conflict is healthy for a relationship as you try to become considerate of one another? This first principle. Conflict, said one, is the price that smart couples pay for a deepening sense of intimacy. Do you know the legendary couple Billy and Ruth Graham? Ruth has now passed away and gone home to heaven. Dr. Graham is elderly and very ill. She was asked about if she and Billy ever had a fight. And she said about her famous husband, I hope so. We sure have had a fight. Otherwise, we would have had no differences and life would be pretty boring. In other words, let me add this. If there is no healthy conflict in a relationship, then one of the partners is losing all the time. One of the partners is getting their way all the time. And eventually, that person will snap. Listen to this. We're wrong even if we're right and we insist on it. We're wrong even if we're right and we insist upon it. This is what considerate looks like, guys. I love this. It's by Bill Farrell. He writes, on the fourth morning of my honeymoon with my wife, I was lying in bed thinking about what an awesome thing marriage was, and it was almost like I was living a dream. And then right before my eyes, the scene started to change. My wife stood in front of the mirror, combing her hair, and verbally criticizing her own body from head to toe. I knew I had to take drastic measures. I wanted to jump out of bed and set her straight by forcing her to like herself. Suddenly, a brainstorm hit me. I walked over to Pam as she was brushing her hair, criticizing her body, and I took the brush out of her hands. I then turned her toward me and made her look at me rather than the mirror. I softly cradled her face in my hands, gazed into her eyes, and said, Pam, from now on, I will be your mirror. Anytime you need to know how beautiful you are, you come to me, and I will reflect back to you the beautiful, valuable woman that God has made you. And Pam, if I have to throw away every mirror in the house to get you to believe me, I will. From now on, I will be your mirror. Unquote. Do you see the kind of understanding? That is a man that's paying attention. That's a man where there's some there. He's thinking about the adjustments he can make to empower her to be the woman God's destined her to become. So let me give you some practical tips for consideration. Because remember, in your relationship, men are the thermostat. They set the temperature. Women are the thermometer. They show the temperature. So guys, if the temperature in your relationship is frigid, y'all may be the problem. Because you're the one that sets the temperature. Here's some treasure her, some considerate kinds of things you might want to do. You guys taking notes? Guys, write this down. Call her just because during a busy workday because I'm thinking of you, my darling. Tonight, put a note under her pillow and write something like this. Oh, my darling, that I could turn back the hands of time, that I might live with you but a moment longer. Did you guys get that one? Be writing this down now, guys. I'm trying to help you. By the way, I just want to say we're a week closer to Valentine's Day. Next, pray with her daily. Next, she doesn't care that you can't cook. Try. Next, run her bath water. Next, if you can't afford a dozen roses, 1 rose will do. Next, a ride in your ugly old car is okay. She may just want to have some time with you. If we continue to do things like this, after a while, she's going to think, hey, he ain't so ugly. It's going to create a whole new sizzle in her heart towards you because she sees you trying to set a whole new warm, very warm temperature. You know, I'm a farm boy, so I've just got to add this. The old farmer said, treat her like a thoroughbred, she'll never become a nag. To treat her like a thoroughbred begins with being very tender and considerate towards her. Now, that's only the first of 5, so let's look quickly at number 2. Number 2 is this: respect. Do you know what the Greek word is there? The Greek word is chivalry. Ladies, let me say this to you. Please do not marry a man that you do not now respect and probably never will respect. And for sure, ladies, Do not marry a man or even begin to give your heart to a man that does not respect you. You say, John, why is that? Here's the why is that. Because you and I cannot truly love somebody that we do not respect. Love is grounded and founded and established upon respect. Anne, as a married woman, writes this. She goes, when I mess up and my husband responds kindly instead of with harsh, reactive anger, I fall in love with him all over again. This is how wives respond to men that treat them tenderly and with respect. However, there is one part of a marriage relationship that I don't think will ever be resolved. This is Tim Hawkins. Watch this.
I love marriage. Marriage, yeah, is awesome. It's so beneficial. So many benefits for a guy when you get married. Like when you get married, you're a guy, you get a little helper in the car. I love my little helper in the car. She knows everything about driving. It's very convenient for me. But sometimes I get confused. See, I don't know how I get anywhere without my helper in the car. I'd probably be bouncing off trees and buildings and stuff, but she's there to help. Like, she tells me when the light changes colors and everything. It's very convenient and helpful. Like, it's green. Thank you, Albert. Because I was confused. I didn't know. Thanks, Captain Prism. She's very helpful in the car for me. I always know how fast I'm going with my helper. She lets me know. You know how fast you're going? Yeah, I got a speedometer right here, but thanks for the backup. That thing ever snaps in half, I got you to back me up. When you see old guys driving 35 on the freeway, it's not because they want to, they've been trained to, for crying out loud. Their foot has been governed by a woman. You ever see like, oh, I want to go faster, I just don't think I should. I just feel like something horrible's gonna happen if I go any lower. Gonna get an ice pick in my ear hole or something bad's gonna happen, Roy. She's very helpful in the car. That's right. She gives me statistics when we're in the car. That's right. You know that men have the most accidents? Gee, I wonder why that is. Let me ponder that for a nanosecond. Bing! It's because the woman in the passenger side, because you always react to every little thing. And that's okay. Just don't do the noise. What was that? That was the garage door opening, sweetheart. We haven't left yet. Can you give me a change of pants before we go? These aren't going to work for the gala. I'm sorry, it was moving. I thought it was a Volvo. I'm sorry. We were driving one night. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And it's just, I'm just so tired. I'm just hallucinating. My wife's just sacked out. She got that eyelid. And we hit a bump. 2 o'clock in the morning. She goes, she says this, you want me to drive? Oh, what would Jesus do? I don't think so. Oh.
How many of you know that's true? Oh, yeah. Number 3, weaker partner. As the weaker partner. Now, let me be crystal clear. When Peter says to defer and prefer her as the weaker partner, this is a physical weakness. Although that's not always true. I've met some very strong girls. What it's speaking about is only physical weakness, not spiritual weakness, not mental weakness. When God sees a husband and wife in marriage, he sees two equal persons. The idea here of a weaker partner is the idea of a soft-boiled egg who maybe cracks easily, maybe cries a little bit quicker and longer. In other words, guys, don't bounce her around or we'll break her. When we lash out in anger, it drains her capacity to respond to us. And there's a lot of angry guys out there who regularly crush the spirit of their wives. And when that happens, they fear to be vulnerable to us. The fourth is this. Back in verse 7, as an heir of the gracious gift of life, or a co-heir of salvation. This is another reason why it's so important, if you're a single individual, to limit your dating pool potential to only people of like faith. God loves everybody, but you're not going to marry everybody. You're going to marry one person. And that person needs to have the same template and blueprint in their life. Because marriage is not so much about two people looking at each other, it's about two people looking in the same direction. And we are co-heirs of salvation together. We are both, as the man and the woman, full and equal bearers of the image of God. And so the key word here is consistency. And then finally, answered prayer. Now, I think what God is saying here is, guys, if you feel like you've hit the wall spiritually, your prayers are going unanswered, you don't feel any positive forward maturing in your faith, I think God is saying to us, my husband, I've given you the greatest treasure of your life, and it's her, your wife. You are not being considerate toward her. You are not respecting her. You're not deferring to her as the weaker partner. You're not honoring her as a co-heir of salvation, and that is why I am not answering your prayers. So in other words, if we want answered prayers, guys, we've got to love our wives as Jesus loved the church. You never see Jesus mistreat his church. But often husbands will mistreat their wives. Remember, our relationship with God can never be right if our relationship with each other, with our wife, is wrong. And that changes our obligation. Fill this in. No success in life, guys, can come close to compensating for failure in our marriage. I close with this. This is my dream for all of our marriages. An older couple went out to eat at a local restaurant, sweet little old couple, married over 50 years. And when it came time to order, they ordered one hamburger, one order of French fries, one soft drink. And the old man unwrapped the plain hamburger, carefully cut it in half, placed half in front of his wife, half in front of himself. He then carefully counted out the French fries, dividing them into two neat equal piles, placed one pile in front of his wife, one pile in front of himself. He took a sip of the drink, then his wife took a sip, then he took a sip, then she took a sip, and then they set the cup down between them. And as he began to eat his few bites of hamburger, the people around them kept looking over and whispering. And you could tell what all the onlookers were thinking was this: that poor old couple, all they can afford is one meal for the two of them. And as the man began to eat his fries, the younger man sitting in the restaurant couldn't take it anymore. He came to the table, politely offered to buy another meal for the old couple, and the old man said, No, young man, we're just fine. We're used to sharing everything. The surrounding people noticed the little old lady hadn't still eaten even one bite. She sat there watching her husband eat, only occasionally taking sips of the drink. Again, the young man came over, begged them to let him buy another meal for them. And this time the old woman said to him, "Oh, thank you so much, young man, but we're used to sharing everything." And as the old man finally finished eating his hamburger and fries, was wiping his face neatly with a napkin, the young man came over yet again to the old lady and asked her why she had yet to take even one single bite of food. And he said, "What are you waiting for?" And she said, "The teeth." When we share the teeth, baby. One guy came up to me yesterday afterward and he goes, "You know what? If we're doing this Jesus kind of marriage thing, I think she should have had the teeth first." Good point. Let's bow our heads in prayer.